to Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life, the podcast. This is Life Coach Myrna Young, and you're listening to 5 Minute Fridays with Coach Myrna. Today, I want to talk on the topic of healing core wounds. Now, core wounds, just for an introduction, are deep-seated emotional injuries that often stem from past experiences, relationships, or traumatic events. These wounds can have a profound impact on our lives, shaping our beliefs, our behaviors, interactions. However, the good news is that healing and releasing these core wounds is possible with the right approach and tools. So in this episode, I want to explore what core wounds are, their effects, and provide actionable steps for you to release and heal them. So let's dive a little deeper to understand what exactly are our core wounds. So our core wounds are emotional wounds that develop early in life due to significant events or experiences that negatively impact our self-esteem, our self-worth, and our sense of safety. These wounds often lead to the formation of defense mechanisms and coping strategies that, while protecting at the time, can hinder our personal growth and relationships in the long run. And if these wounds are left untreated, which most of them are, because how many of us go into therapy? And even when we go into therapy, we don't even know what the problem is. It takes a very skilled therapist to get to your core wounds because it happens very early in life, sometimes even before 10 years old. You know, one of my core wounds happened when I was around 13. And it wasn't really, it was just a wake-up call for me. And that wake-up call has affected my entire life. My entire life trajectory changed after this significant event, which was a core wound that happened to me. So mine was a little late at 13, but most times it happens between the ages of maybe 5 and 10. Okay, so if these wounds are left untreated, it can lead to self-sabotaging behaviors, fear of intimacy, low self-confidence, and difficulty in trusting oneself and others. These wounds can manifest in various areas of your life, such as work, friendship, romantic relationships, and these hold us back from reaching our full potential. So today, I want to leave you with 8 ways that you can work on releasing your core wounds. And the first one is self-awareness or clarity, right? A lot of times, you don't even know you have a wound. You just know that you're showing up differently, right? So the first step is self-awareness. Recognize and acknowledge your core wounds. Reflect on your past experiences and emotions to identify patterns and triggers that may be connected to these wounds. So that's a lot of times what happens, right? You don't exactly know what your core wound is unless you go and get therapy. But if you understand your patterns or why am I being triggered whenever someone says or does something, you know, why am I being triggered? So your triggers actually lead you down the path, lead you down the rabbit hole to what exactly is festering down there, right? The second thing is seek professional help. Once you identify or have self-awareness that something is wrong, that you're not showing up at your best self, then the next step is to seek professional help, because healing wounds, especially core wounds, often requires the support of a therapist or a counselor experienced in trauma and emotional healing. And they can provide you with the guidance, the tools, and a safe space to explore and address these core ones. You know that you don't want to be criticized. You don't want to feel small. You want to be safe to say what's on your mind in a trusting environment. So meditation and mindfulness. A lot of times when you meditate and you're in stillness, then things actually pop up in your mind. So if there's something that you might have, stuffed down, a lot of times meditation allows it to boil up to the top, right? So meditation can help you observe your thoughts and emotions without judgment. And this also creates a space for healing and reducing the intensity of the emotional charge associated with core wounds. Because a lot of times your triggers can lead to anger. Your triggers can lead to even self-abuse and self-sabotage, right? So, right. The next one is inner child work. Like I said in the beginning, core wounds often originate from childhood experiences. Engaging in inner child work often involves connecting with your younger self, offering love and understanding, and healing the wounded aspects of your psyche, right? So yeah, there's a meditation that I do that I go back to my inner child. I go back to my childhood self. And then, you're looking for those experiences that might have influenced how you're showing up as an adult. And one of the ones that I remember doing was going and looking out of my childhood window. When you're looking out, what are you seeing? What are your thoughts? It's one way to put yourself in the situation in your mind. You're not going there physically, in your mind. And a lot of times that can pry open some doors, things that you have shut away because you don't want to face them, right? Journaling works for me, right? My little iPhone with my notes, I can go back years and years and years, because whenever I have a thought, when I have an emotion, whenever I want to tell someone off, I write it in my diary. I get it out, right? Yes, because if you don't get it out, it stays stuck down in there as a core wound. So writing your thoughts, feelings, and experiences can aid in processing and releasing emotions tied to core wounds. It also can help you gain clarity on the beliefs and narratives that are formed around these wounds, because how many of you know it's the story that you tell yourself? It's really not even actual what happened, but it's the story that you give it, right? So a core wound means that someone or something did something to you. And one of the ways to release them is forgiving that person, or even maybe sometimes forgiving your own self, maybe something that you felt that you did wrong, right? So forgiveness, can lead to, is a powerful step towards releasing the core wounds, right? It doesn't mean that you're condoning what happened or what they did to you, but you're releasing the emotional burden that's attached to it. Have you heard the saying, unforgiveness is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die? Unforgiveness is not for them. Unforgiveness is for you, right? So practice unforgiveness, right? Practice forgiveness. All right, number 7 is self-compassion. Treat yourself with the same kindness and compassion that you would offer to a friend. How many of you know that you speak to yourself a lot of times very poorly, and you would never speak to your friend or someone that you love like that? So challenge negative self-talk and replace it with affirmations and supportive statements. Love yourself. Number 8, healthy relationships. Now, if you've got a core wound, then healthy relationships are going to be a struggle. You're going to have to work at them because guess what? You're showing up with the baggage. You're showing up with the wound. So when you can have healthy relationships in the present moment, it helps you to engage and release those negative core wounds. For instance, a core wound could be someone telling you that you're unlovable. So when you're in a healthy, loving relationship, it kind of says that they're a liar. I am lovable, right? So supportive relationships encourage your growth and healing. So try to surround yourself with people that uplift and respect your journey. So those were the 8 tips that I wanted to leave with you to help you to release and heal from your core wound. Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life radio and podcast. This is Life Coach Brittany Young, and my guests today are Dr. Reagan Gurung and Joey Flores. And we are going to be talking today on understanding mental well-being and prioritizing it in life. So welcome, Dr. Gurung.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Jose.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. All right, so let me give you guys a short introduction to my guests. Dr. Reagan Gurung is a social psychologist, an award-winning author with a background in social health and psychology. Gurung is an assistant professor of psychology and associate vice provost and executive director at Oregon State University. Reagan is one of the authors of the book, Everyday Applications of Psychological Science, Hacks to Happiness and Health. Our second guest today is Joey Flores. He is a psychology scholar and writer on psychology, law, and digital culture. His educational background includes applied psychology and forensic psychology. Flores has served as a contributing writer for publications such as HuffPost and Yahoo News. His work has also been sourced in online newspapers, magazines, radio, and television news outlets, as well as scientific journals and books. He's also written about women's health as seen in Glamour, The Standard, Reader's Digest, and Psychology Today. So I hope that we're going to have a really good conversation today. We're focusing on mental well-being and how we can prioritize it in life. So as I start off, I'm going to start with Dr. Reagan. You have a background in pedagogical, I have to sound that out, psychology. This is the first time that I've heard that term. Can you explain what that is, please?
Absolutely. So pedagogical is really all about teaching and learning, is one easy way to think about it. And in my role as both executive director for the Center for Teaching and Learning and also as a professor of psychology, I study those factors that help students learn. And that's a big focus of my recent years, is really looking at what are those factors that, really help somebody learn. And that's why it dovetails very well with mental health, because if you are not happy, if you are stressed, well, you're not going to learn well. So, as a health psychologist, I studied stress and coping. Also, as a teacher, as somebody who teaches 400 students a term, mental health is important. And I've now started thinking about how can we make sure that that environment that the student is in, that people are in general, is also a happy one, so that they'll be in a better position to learn.
Well, that's good. You're right. Because if your mind is cluttered with all kinds of things, nothing is going to come through it.
Yep.
So how do you help them with this word? Say the word. Yeah, you said the word again.
Right. So
it's, explain how, if you were, if you're in school, how you would help someone learn better with focusing on on this kind of psychology?
Right. So the pedagogical notion really is all about teaching learning. And that's, this is, how does a student study? How does a teacher instruct? Do you use outlines well? Do you have them practice things in a certain way? And one of my main interests is and foci is beyond looking at content, because I think so often in school, there's so much emphasis on content. You've got to memorize, or you've got to understand, or you've got to know this book, right? And I think so often when we focus in on a book or on content, we forget about the other factors that influence attention. And I think, you put your finger on it. You can't pay attention if you're stressed. You can't concentrate if there are lots of things going on in your life. And when I look out at my classes, and if I'll see a student sitting there with a frown on their face, well, I may think, oh, they're not understanding this material. But sometimes it's not just they can't understand the material, or it's difficult material. Sometimes there are things going on in my life that don't allow me to focus. So that's why I love the topic of this show, because I think if we don't really pay attention to how we feel, how we're doing, whether it's school or work or even our close relationships, they're not going to go as well. We've got to take care of those mental health issues.
All right. So how do you do that? What's a practical way of handling that? So let's say that someone has got a mental health issue, and maybe something is happening at home, or and they can't concentrate because they've got all these things. How does psychology help them? What do you do?
Wow. So, I mean, that's probably the topic for a 10-hour show, and not a short one. But let me break it down, I think, into two main parts, and then you can, tease up and go deeper wherever you want.
Right.
So I think right off the bat, the first thing I think I need to say is that we all should remember that there is a spectrum, there is a scale, a range of not feeling good, right? So, when you think about what is mental health, what is mental health, what is mental illness? Well, we've got to start with the realization that there's a range. There is a big difference between, I don't feel too good right now, versus I can't sleep, I can't eat, I can't think, right?
Yes, you're
And
right.
actually,
Yes.
right? And it's even more than that. You may feel so down for a day or 2 days. It's very different from you feeling really down for 2 weeks. And so that's the first thing anybody listening should bear in mind. We all have periods of blue moods. We all have short periods of anxiety, short periods of stress, short periods of what's commonly referred to in psychology as depressed mood. That's very different from clinical depression or clinical anxiety. And if you're wondering, is there an easy cutoff? Well, an easy cutoff that we can share in minutes is, how long have you been feeling like that? If it's been, and the rule of thumb is, if you've been feeling like that for 2 weeks or more, go get help. Call somebody, talk to somebody, and that's so important. There are so many of us who are, say, oh, I'm resilient, I'm strong, I'm tough, I can make it through this. Well, psychology and psychological science says no. As resilient as you may be, we all can do with some help, and psychological science is there to provide it. So whether it's a clinician, whether it's a counselor, and it depends what setting you're in. If you're in a workplace setting, there may be somebody at work. If you're in a school or college setting, there's a health center. If you have been feeling down, and we don't even need to get more jargony, if you have been feeling down, if you've been feeling low for 2 weeks or so, go get some help. If you've been feeling low for 1 or 2 days, well, that's when we can go into next, right? Because you said, what can you do? There are some short-term things that can make a difference, right? This first one may or may not surprise you. Sleep more, all right? Sleep more. Very often when we don't sleep enough, that completely colors our attention.
But isn't that feeling, when you're stressed, you don't sleep, and then it circles back where you feel worse, right? but
right?
yes.
And that's exactly it. And actually,
Mhm.
I like the way you said circle, because let's reverse that circle. Because you're stressed, you're not sleeping.
Right.
Well, lo and behold, you force yourself to sleep more, it actually turns around and influences your stress. So, in the intro, you mentioned that I'm a health psychologist. One of the things we study in health psychology is what is the physiology of stress. Well, a lot of stress is in our minds, right? Shakespeare said there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it
Makes it
so,
so.
right?
I
And
like that
so,
one. Right,
right.
right.
And so a large part of stress is you thinking whether you're
Yes.
stressed or not. But that's all well and good. But the reality is, once you think you are stressed, it activates a whole cascade of activity in your body.
Yeah.
And you
Cortisol
can,
levels go up
yep,
and
you
all
got
that
it.
stuff, right?
Yep,
Yes.
yep. The fight or flight response,
Yeah.
cortisol levels,
Mhm.
catecholamines, adrenaline, all of that stuff, insulin levels. And when you sleep, you actually can reverse a lot of that. Now, it actually, here's an even quicker fix.
Mhm.
Right now, I'm talking slower and breathing deeper. Right there is a arm of our nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is all about getting us back to normal after we are stressed. And you and I, listeners, can help out their parasympathetic nervous system as simply as breathing slower. Now,
I
you
work a
may,
lot on that.
yep,
Even I just finished doing a webinar on the vagus nerve, and I learned
yep,
so much about the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic. And I activate it every day. When I go into the park, I hum. I make sure I do my box breathing. And you're
yep,
right.
yep.
You get your
Yeah. So and so you nailed it, right? So right there, and
yeah.
clearly, there's a whole show on that, which is great. But I think next to that, so that's one category. You mentioned the park, which brings in the second thing: get some physical activity, right? Right.
Yeah,
And we can unpack that. But I'll mention the third thing, and here's probably the biggest one for the majority of us: give yourself some mental space. So many of us, I mean, and I see this in my students. I see this when I'm waiting at an airport. I see this at the grocery store. There are so many people who, the moment they have a moment, they will flip out their phone and start scrolling, right? Now, if they're scrolling to your YouTube videos, that's great because they learned something.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the
It's
reality
bad.
is,
It's bad.
yep,
It's bad. Those phones are just, it's hijacked everybody. You know what I mean? Nobody even wants to talk to you. I look at people that just have that thing in their hands and they're not interacting with anybody or just filling dead space by scrolling, or some people are
oh,
addicted to news.
so
News
here's,
comes in every 5 minutes, but you're right, you're not giving their brain time to,
yeah,
we're talking about rest and digest, right?
right.
There's no resting, there's no digesting, which is why meditation again helps with stress, because even if you just sit, right, you're so that was a great introduction to that word. I'm not going to say it again, but
Right.
but I'm understanding what it is helping people study and understand. And I think you also have a book on that, right? What's the name of
Right.
the book?
So it's how to study like a champ.
Right.
And this topic and what you talked about is so important that there's an entire chapter on physical activity and sleep, and actually not finding yourself locked to your phone. Because when people normally think about, oh, Dr. Gurung, tell me, how should I study? Well, cognitive science will has some recommendations. You should repeatedly test yourself. You should space out your studying instead of cramming. But what we don't say enough in that breath, or in that sentence, or in that recommendation is take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Eat well. Get physical activity. And that's my crossover is, whenever I think about teaching and learning, and in the book Study Like a Champ, yeah, we give you cognitive skills, and and when I say we, this is my co-author John Dunlowski at Kent State, and he and I have both studied learning and cognition for years, and we've both been teachers for years. So this book is not just some jargony, this is what the scientists say. We've actually put it into terms that will be readable and understandable, I think, to students. But a big part of that is what you're so nicely focusing on, which is mental health, which is the taking care of ourselves, which is avoiding burnout.
Yeah. Yes, very important, very important. Yes. You got to clear the brain before you can stuff things in it, right? Right.
So let me just throw in one really quick one, because I always like quick, pragmatic things. Whether it's you, Myrna, or anybody listening, ask yourself this question. How long in the morning is it before you touch your phone? Now, I'm not talking about shut your alarm off, because I know many folks use it for their alarm, but I'm saying, how long is it in the morning before you touch your phone to look at stuff? Okay, and I know you're thinking, and I can see you smiling.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, I have a pretty big morning routine. I read my Bible, I meditate, I go walk in the park, I listen to podcasts or inspirational books, and that takes 2 hours or more. But you're right. When I get up, before I do any of my meditation stuff, I mean, for some reason I do check my phone, and I know I'm not supposed to check my phone until I do all those other things. But yes, you got me. But you're right. I've heard a lot of people say it, and it's not anything new. Don't check that phone.